All right, welcome back to the Fantasy Labs podcast. This is Brian. It is Wednesday night. I'm here with Tank Williams. We're going to go through the entire Week 15 NFL slate. Bales and Peter are both out doing the big football week is here, so they're in San Diego doing that tournament. So just Tank and I this week. Tank, what's up, man?
Not much, man. I don't know how I feel about this since Kershaw signed with Arizona, right? So
Right.
guess we're not boys anymore.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it was Greinke.
Was that Greinke?
Yeah. Right?
Oh, so Kershaw's still with LA, so we still good?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean,
Oh,
I haven't seen any
yeah.
Kershaw news. I mean,
Well, welcome back. Well, then I'll make sure I hang out with you once I get back from Cuba then.
all right, sounds good. Yeah, Kershaw still is. Greinke was the guy that went to the Diamondbacks, but
They got paid a buttload of money.
yeah, a lot of money. Yeah, those are the like four pitcher guys that all got signed, like the four main free agents. It's for like $1 billion total. It's ridiculous. There's so much money in it.
I know Price got a lot. I know he got a lot. And then they said Cueto got – well, I guess the Giants got a team-friendly deal for him, but I think he got broke off too.
No, yeah, he got a lot of money. Yeah, I think it was a pretty good deal for the Giants, but it was still – I mean, it's still ridiculous.
Yeah.
6-year, $130 million, yeah, for Cueto.
Must be nice.
Must be nice. Yeah, so this is actually an NFL pod, I assure you, so don't leave. We are going to go through the slate. So it's Week 15. We got 16 games. Obviously, this is when it really starts heating up because all these live finals, the big tournaments and stuff are happening. So it's some exciting time in fantasy football for sure. And we're going to do our best to break it down. So we'll kind of jump right into it. So the game tomorrow, Thursday night, is Tampa Bay at St. Louis. Just a quick note. Todd Gurley is probable. He had missed some practice, but it looks like he is going to play. They announced today that he was probable to play. Vincent Jackson is going to be out for Thursday. So, Tank, I'll kick it to you. So, Todd Gurley is obviously a guy who we've been, playing a lot this year. Has been struggling for a couple weeks there. Only, didn't even get 10 carries. And it's not like he got a lot of volume, but finally broke off 140-yard game, had 2 touchdowns, kind of looked more like himself, like he did earlier in the year. But do you think he can do that against a pretty decent Bucs run defense, or how do you expect this game to go?
Yeah, that's the thing. The Bucs run defense really isn't that bad, and I just want to see how healthy Gurley is. I mean, it's good that he's going into the game probable, but whenever you hear knee, when it's a guy coming off an ACL injury, that always scares you a little bit. But yeah. I think the best thing would be just to kind of track. Did he get a full practice in today? I think he was limited, right?
Yeah, I think he was limited. Let's see. I wrote a blurb about it, so I should know this. No, he was full practice today.
Well, that's good. I mean, if he's full practice, then, it's one of those things where we've talked about it time and time again. When you have a good back and elite back like Todd Gurley, regardless of if he just has a slam dunk matchup like it's going against the New Orleans Saints or a tougher matchup against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if you have an elite back, you just got to roll with them at times because a lot of times you find those good defenses that like to stack the box. All it takes is getting behind the second level of the defense, and then he's hitting his head on the goalpost. So even though it may seem like a tough matchup, sometimes you just got to roll with those guys and just be contrarian.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I meant to read this line. I'll do it now. So the over-under is 41 total, and St. Louis is 2.5-point favorites. So kind of just looking through the data, it's kind of just a tough matchup for both teams. You have Jameis going against this St. Louis defense that is the toughest matchup of the slate to quarterbacks. They've allowed, looks like 3.3 points below salary expectations of quarterbacks, which is tied for the toughest matchup with the Broncos. So, just kind of tough matchup all around. Is there any guys that really stand out to you as potential plays? I think maybe not in cash, but maybe guys that you could look at in a tournament?
Yeah, definitely not in cash. I mean, I think when you see Vincent Jackson being out, then maybe Mike Evans, I think he'll likely be on Janoris Jenkins, who's a good cornerback, but at the same time, he likes to gamble a little bit and then can give up some big plays. Tampa Bay's defense has been playing pretty well down the stretch as of late, but, they've had their moments where they're giving up a lot of plays. I think we can recall. I can't remember what his exact number was, but Kendall Wright had a decent game against him in the first game of the season, and then you can kind of look to Dang, why am I blanking on a little homie's name? Tavon Austin. You can look at him as being a similar type wide receiver, and then you also can throw in what he does in special teams as maybe being a viable option in the GPPs. And then also just because both of those offenses are pretty erratic, I think you can look at the defenses as well. But
Sure.
as you said, there's nothing that you can hang your hat on in the cash game. But for GPPs, where I mean, you wouldn't be surprised if St. Louis, picked off Jameis Winston a couple of times and took one to the house, and vice versa for Tampa Bay
Yep.
defense. I think that's how you have to look at it for the plays that you would do out of these games, the GPP plays, and what could potentially happen with the matchups.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a potential good game to, maybe play Thursday slates and then fade the guys, just because I'm not sure there's a ton of upside in these guys' ceilings. So if you think that they're potentially going to be maybe a little over-owned, if people are going to chase points and go Gurley again, or maybe try to load up on Doug Martin. Maybe you can enter some tournaments and just fade them and hope that they have tough games. And then it's obviously easy money from there, especially in cash games. But so that's a good strategy that I wouldn't mind doing. But yeah, I wouldn't really focus your playing Thursday matchups in cash, and maybe some tournament exposure here if you really want to. So cool. Let's keep moving. Let's get to the Sunday games. First one we'll talk about is the Jets at the Cowboys.
It's actually Saturday.
Oh, Saturday. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Forgot about that. I forgot. Yeah, Saturday game. So over under 42, and the Jets are 3-point favorites. So I'll kick it to you. What are your initial thoughts on this game, Tank?
I mean, well, what jumps to mind initially is that Ryan Fitzpatrick and that Jets offense, especially the wide receivers, have been playing
real good
these days. And then even though Ivory's been okay, I mean, the main guy's been Bilal Powell. Especially in the pass game, too, catching balls out of the backfield. And so this is one game where you're facing a Dallas defense that's actually pretty good against the pass. And they've just been pretty good overall because they've just had shitty quarterback play on their end. So if they don't play good defense, then they're going to be knocked out of games early. So they've been on point. And so I expect them to be on point again in this game against New York. So even though I really like those guys, the way they've been playing the past couple of weeks, I think it may be tougher sledding for them. But I mean, I think if it's going to be any kind of GPP plays or anything like that, it's going to be on the New York side of the ball. I mean, perfect example. I mean, you look at Dallas, and I mean, they haven't been able to do anything offensively. I mean, Brad Castle just hasn't been able to get the job done. Is it Brad Castle? No, that's the dude I played in Tennessee. Matt Castle.
Brad Castle.
Yeah, shout out to my boy Brad Castle. Hard-nosed cat from North Texas. Holla at your boy. But yeah, Matt Castle hasn't been able to do shit. And so Dez's value is in the shit. Witten is in the shitter. I mean, everybody's in. I mean, Darren McFadden, who was a good cash play for Bills the middle part of this season, he's in the shitter. So, I mean, I wouldn't look at any of those guys. If you don't look at any plays, it'd probably be the Jets side. Honestly, the best play in this game is the New York Jets defense because they're facing Matt Castle. So there you go.
Yeah.
If you want to cut all the bullshit, just play the Jets defense because he's bound to throw you a pick six.
Yeah, I mean, the frustrating thing with the Cowboys is McFadden looked so good last week. I mean, he only got 9 rushing attempts because they got down so quickly. They just didn't want to run the ball, even though Bales makes fun of them for establishing the run. They actually didn't really do that last week. But yeah, so they didn't really get back to him just because they were down so big early. But he had 9 attempts for 111 yards. So he had like a 12.5 yard per rush average, which is just ridiculous. So he looked really good. And I think potentially, this is a pretty good matchup for him. But the problem is that Dallas is just so bad, especially the passing game and everything, that they just get down and it's hard to rely on a guy like McFadden,
That's the thing. I mean, I just don't know how good of a matchup it is. I mean, when you look at it, the Jets are giving up like 3.6 yards per rush, only 2 rushing touchdowns against them this year.
Sure.
I think they're giving up the least amount of rushing yards in the league this year. So, I don't know. I mean, and are they playing in New York too?
It's at Dallas.
In Dallas? I mean, well, that helps the Cowboys, but still like the matchup. I mean, that's one of those things. Well, I mean, it could be a potential GPP play. I mean, but I don't look at it as like a slam dunk. Definitely not cash.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely interested in GPP just because he has looked good. I think the skill is there. Unfortunately, the game script really just hasn't worked out for him. He's really the only guy on Dallas I'm looking at. And then, on New York side, I do agree that these wide receivers continue to be intriguing. Decker's usually a guy we target in GPPs because he's just so good in the red zone, but he's actually been really consistent. He's getting a lot of targets from Fitzpatrick and playing well. Him and Marshall are a good tandem, and they've been really consistent. So, if you're looking at wide receivers in cash or GPPs, I think there's worse options. I agree Dallas is pretty good, but so are these guys. So I'm fine with them in GPPs in kind of maybe fringe cash plays. There's like a Saturday slate, I need to check if there's a Saturday slate, and you want to go that route. But let's keep on moving. Next game. So finally, Sunday games now. First one we'll talk about is Atlanta at the Jaguars. And let's see the line here. Over-under is 49, and Jacksonville is actually 3-point favorites. Oh, how far Atlanta has fallen this year. Started off really well, and now, dogs against Jacksonville and just kind of really struggling this season. So, so what are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I guess we might as well start on Jacksonville's side of the ball, which is pretty surprising, right? When I'm gonna talk about Jacksonville and say like that's the side we need to focus on as far as plays and not Atlanta. But I mean, shit, it's been a crazy 2015 NFL season. But Blake Bortles continues the ball. He has a great matchup here against Atlanta, and he's still pretty reasonable at 6,100. So I mean, I like him. I mean, you can't go wrong. Allen Robinson, I think his only catch last week was the touchdown, but that's just an anomaly. He's going to continue to get his targets because they love to pass the ball, love to spread the ball around. So I like him. I like Hearns. I think probably one of the most intriguing plays on that offense this week is going to be Denard Shoelace Robinson because TJ Yeldon is going to be out. And so, I mean, Denard, he's at – where is he? Like 4,600 or something like that? Yeah, 4,600. And so he's going to probably get the lion's share of the carry. So, I mean, I really like him. Teal Julius has been consistent. I think he's caught a touchdown the last 3 or 4 games. Then actually got a return for a touchdown by their defense. So everything Jacksonville has been clicking. And then if you flip it, I mean, this should be a pretty good matchup for Matt Ryan. I mean, so maybe GPP play for him going against that Jacksonville pass defense. Julio, who slowed down significantly because that offense just can't get right.
Yeah.
And then, that's about it. I mean, we were all on Devontae Freeman. He was riding high early this year, and now he's gone to shit. But it would be a really good matchup for him against that Jacksonville Jaguars run defense. So maybe this is the time to roll him out in the GPP. And how much is he now? He's dropped all the way down to 7,500. So that's pretty reasonable compared to where he was. Now, is he splitting any carries with Tevin Coleman now, or is it just him?
So he's got 12 and 14 carries the last 2 weeks, and Tevin's only got 3 apiece. So not really. They just really haven't been
blown out.
Yeah, they just kind of like Dallas. They just never got back to the run, just because they've been down so much. Devontae has been struggling. His yards per carry is fairly low, looks like. Yeah, low 3s the last couple of games. But, I do think this is a really good matchup. I mean, our opponent plus minus data says that this is the best matchup for a running back. So Devontae Freeman is the best matchup of the slate against Jacksonville. Our own John Daigle, he wrote an article about blind spots, and potentially, it's kind of weird because rushing DVOA says the Jaguars are really good, but our data that's salary based says that the Jaguars have just a lot of fantasy points, and I think it's because they've just been really unlucky in the red zone and having short yard touchdowns. But I mean, data is data, and it's not wrong. So I think Devontae is definitely interesting. I don't think that you can really bank on Atlanta's offense and put him in cash, but at 75, I think he's really intriguing tournament play. I think Julio is actually really interesting here just because, he was the premier play, one of the last couple of weeks and have kind of disappointed a little bit. I know a lot of it has to do with the offense, but, now he's down to 85 below Antonio Brown and Odell, who's just been a beast, obviously. But I think you're going to find him really under-owned. And it's not like Julio is bad. It's just been the offense, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think you can't really pinpoint Julio has been the one that's been struggling offense. I mean, I think a lot of the criticism is going to, with Matty Ice, just turn the ball over, like errant throws, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
obviously they haven't been able to run the ball either, so that doesn't help. So, yeah, I think it's just a combination of factors. But if we look at it and there's going to be a game where Julio bounces back, at least during, towards this latter part of the season, this is a golden matchup because he has to face Josh Norman again next week. So you better get in right now when you can.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I agree on your points on the pass catchers for the Jaguars. They just exploded last week. It didn't really include Allen Robinson, which is a little odd. They really spread it around. Herndon's got a lot of action, had over 100 yards. They looked at Julius Thomas a lot, so I think he's interesting. Still probably really underpriced at 47 in a good matchup. So I think that if you're looking for a cash tight end, I think there might be a couple other plays I'll prefer, but I think he's pretty good. The problem is Boyles has shown that he's willing to spread the ball around a little bit. So it might take them out of cash. I still think that, Thomas and Robinson are good plays, but maybe you want to get a little more exposure on the tournament side just because you're unsure of, how the targets are going to break down.
And that's the thing where I'll say this quick comment just before we get off this game. Like when Devontae Freeman was balling out earlier this year, that's the kind of shit I expected to happen. Like you scored 3 touchdowns in the game. Usually you have a game how Allen Robinson had. I mean, that's just naturally how I would see games progress when I was playing ball. That's why it was so shocking to me to see Devontae Freeman just ball game after game after game after game. Earlier this year, I'm like, what the fuck? Like usually it's like this. Like you have 3 touchdowns. And then you may have like 1 catch for a touchdown. I mean, he's still involved, but you kind of spread the ball around because the defense is going to focus in on that guy. And I think that's why the run that Devontae Freeman had earlier this year was just like a total anomaly because you usually don't see that in the league. It's usually what we saw from Allen Robinson last 2 weeks ago and then last week.
Yep. Yeah, I agree for sure. Let's keep on moving. The next game that we're going to talk about is Buffalo at Washington. Over under here is 44 is the total, and the Bills are 1-point favorites. I'll kick it to you. What are your thoughts on this game?
What was the over-under on this one?
It's 43. 44. I'm sorry. It's 44 total, and the Bills are 1-point favorites. So almost
I mean, just thinking about this one, I don't think there's anything that just really jumps out at me. I think both of these teams have been pretty decent against the run. They've given up their shots in the past game, but at the same time, neither one of these teams have been really consistent, just tearing teams apart in the past game. So from that standpoint, I mean, I think he's just throwing darts at a dartboard, really. I mean, I really like Jordan Reed and what he's been able to do, but at the same time, I mean, he had a really good game last week. Buffalo's a pretty tough defense, so there could be some potential good plays just based off volume that Reed gets and maybe the amount of carries that LaShawn may get, kind of throwing it around a little bit. Bless you.
Yeah,
but
thanks.
Honestly, I mean, I don't think there's anything that jumps out to me in this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of looking through the matchups and looking through the data, every play is like not awful, but it's just like slightly below average. So I'm not sure if there's, a lot of places you can look for, cash here. I agree. Jordan Reed has looked really good lately. He had that awesome game last week against the Bears where he went for, over 100 yards and had that touchdown. And there's not just great plays. The best, I guess, matchup data-wise would be the Washington pass game potentially on the outside versus Buffalo. But, I don't really trust that. I mean, maybe – I don't know. Yeah, the problem is who are you going to go, really? On the other side, Buffalo – Washington's pretty good against the run. So, Sean McCoy's been really consistent lately, kind of against every team. So, he's been solid even against, pretty good run defenses lately, like the Texans and the Chiefs. And so, I mean, potentially, I guess you could go there. I think there's upside there and some consistency. So I think it's a fringe cash play. But I'm not sure maybe the favorite of the week. And then the Buffalo wide receivers just are not getting any looks in the red zone. So they might get some targets, but it's just really I just don't think they're really threats to score, which you would want in a GPP, and they're not even really getting, I guess, enough volume for me to and consistency for me to like trust in cash games either. So, yeah, I agree. Kind of a very average, below average matchup everywhere, and just not an exciting one. And I think with 16 games, you don't really need to focus on this one too much.
Mhm.
Cool. Any last thoughts on that one? You want to move on?
I think we can move on.
All right, cool. Next game, Carolina at the Giants. Let me pull the line here. Line I got is over-under is 48, and Panthers are 5.5-point favorites. So, yeah, I think the question that everyone wants you to answer, Tank, is what your thoughts on Norman versus Odell?
Man, I think I saw a stat on TV today, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, but it was something like Josh Norman against the elite wide receivers that included like Julio and some other guys who are just ballers. I think there was like they have 7 catches for like 98 yards or something like that. It was like something ridiculous to the point to where I would say, even though I think OBJ is a monster, a beast, I really don't want to fool with him and pay that kind of price tag with Norman on him. That being said, I mean, I think a lot of times when you expect a lot of people to be scared off, maybe you want to have a little bit of exposure in GPPs just because, I mean, Odell is a beast too, but I don't think the prospects are high of him putting up another performance like we saw on Monday night against the Dolphins. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. So I've been thinking about this a lot this week. So the thing that I'm trying to juggle is, all right, so Norman, so I think the stat was like 9 receptions for 89 against those guys, which is crazy. He's just so good. So the question is obviously it's not a great matchup. And just kind of in a vacuum, you would want to fade a guy who's in an awful matchup like that, especially when there's other guys in better matchups that you could focus on. But as always in GPPs, you also have to juggle it with ownership. So you have to think, okay, is he going to be low enough owned because of that reason? Because people are scared of the Josh Norman, where I could, get him at a really big discount. And I think the thing that I'm coming to is that I don't think most people, especially in a sport like daily fantasy football, where you have some casual players, probably a lot of casual players, I don't think they really know the Josh Norman, Odell Beckham matchup. I think you guys do, our listeners do, because just the fact that you're listening to a fantasy football podcast and on Fantasy Labs, like you're obviously, one of the more advanced players just in general. But I don't think most people know that. So I don't think he's going to really be as low owned as he probably should be in this matchup. I don't know.
I mean, I could kind of see that, but then at the same time, like Josh Norman has been getting like Darrelle Revis type coverage on these national, television stations like all this year.
As
like
he should, sure.
Major stories and interviews run on Norman and stuff like that. I mean, he was on Gruden's like bus for the Monday night game and stuff like that. So I think there's enough exposure where like the casual watcher is at least aware of him to a certain extent. But I understand what you're saying. I just think it may end up being like somewhere in between of where you think it'll be and where I think it'll be.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, I mean, do you still feel it's worthwhile to have OBJ and what percentage of lineups?
Yeah, I'd say no. I say fade. I just don't really think that there's going to be enough value there to go. Like I wouldn't like blame you for sure, but I just don't think there's much there.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely interesting. That'll obviously be a question. He could obviously win a lineup or win a tournament for sure. But
he did last week.
Yeah, you could also tank you there. Norman could shut him down, and yeah, it's tough. It'll be definitely primetime viewing for sure. But yeah, so talking about the other guys, since there are more players playing than these two guys, Cam obviously is cash game play. He's getting a really good matchup against the Giants, who aren't great in the passing game. Greg Olsen didn't practice today, but they came out and said that they're still really optimistic that he will play on Sunday. He's obviously got a great matchup. The Giants have allowed 5.5 points over expectations to tight ends, which isn't the worst matchup or isn't the worst team against tight ends, but they are one of the worst. So I think that he is definitely in cash play, definitely one of the better plays to tight end this week.
And even if he plays, I don't expect him to play that much just because I think they should at least try to get him close to 100% if he does have a knee. So maybe look for Ed Dixon in that role.
Yeah, I mean, they have bigger aspirations than this week. Yeah, for sure. And one other important note on their side before we move on to the next game is Jonathan Stewart is officially out, so Fozzie Whitaker will be the starting running back. So I think it looks like he's going to be he's bare minimum price at $3,000 on DraftKings, and in a game where the Panthers are 5.5, 6-point favorites and expected to be up. Not a bad matchup, really, here.
Yeah, I mean, Fozzie Whitaker, I mean, you just have to look at him. And then I'm not sure if Cameron Artis-Payne was active last week or not. I mean, but he could potentially get some carries as well. But like you said, I mean, in the interview, Rivera came out and said that Fozzie Whitaker would likely get the start. And so him at 3,000, I mean, you just can't really pass that up. And he has two really good matchups coming down the stretch. I probably expect them to rest Jonathan Stewart for the rest of the season. I think he plays, the Giants right here, and then they roll back with another matchup against Atlanta. So he'll probably still be fairly cheap for the next 2 weeks. So we should take advantage of while you can. Definitely cash play.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there is a little risk just because, they like to run Cam in the red zone, and obviously you have to worry about Tolbert, vulturing some touchdowns in the red zone. But, at 3,000, it puts the implied points that Whitaker has to hit value at 4.8 DraftKings points. And at $3,000 on DraftKings, what is that? Just, like 20 yards. So I think that he is obviously one of the best values. I would definitely monitor it and see if they come out with any news. They did say that he is going to start, but if they give any news on Tolbert and see if he's going to get more than expected or be a running back by committee or something like that, that'll obviously change things. But for now, it looks like Whitaker is definitely a really good play at 3K. So Carolina offense for sure in a really good place. Let's keep on moving. Bears at the Vikings is the next game we'll hit on. And the line that I have here is 43 is the total, and the Vikings are 5.5-point favorites. So, So what are your thoughts here, Tank?
I mean, I think this should be a decent matchup for Adrian Peterson. That's for sure. I think the last time he played him, he had 20 carries for 103 yards. He didn't have a tub, but, a really solid outing. The Minnesota offense has been trending more towards the run game, just trying to get back on track. And he actually looked pretty good, at least the first drive of the game against Arizona last week before everything fell off. But he did get a touchdown. And so I would expect just with a little less resistance with that Chicago rush defense, he should be able to get back on track and put up a pretty good performance. And they needed to try to stay in the playoff race. So I think he's at 7,100 right now. I mean, I think that's definitely worthwhile rolling with him, especially because they're going to lean heavy on him. I think another guy that really stands out to me, and he's in an interesting spot, is Diggs.
Okay.
I think let's see where he is value-wise. He's at 4,000. And I think the last time he played against Chicago, he had a really good game. He had 21.5 DFS points. So, I mean, so I really like him. They really haven't been targeting him lately. So, I mean, that would be more of a GPP play more than anything else. I think also you have to look at that Minnesota Vikings defense as well. I mean, I think they're going to try to come out. Hopefully they get some guys back. Chicago's offense has been sputtering as of late. And then also you always have the threat of Cordell Patterson returning a kick or Sherlis returning a punt for a touchdown. So, and if you recall, I mean, the first thing that jumps out to me is, Arizona, David Johnson returning the kickoff earlier on in the year. So we know that special teams where Chicago's a little suspect. So that's definitely worthwhile. I think when you look at the Chicago running backs, the way they've been splitting carries, I don't know if there's one guy you can hang your hat on, so you lose a little value there. So if there's going to be any play, it'll probably be the tight end who's been getting targeted a lot since Martellus Bennett is on IR, so that's Miller. And then also, of course, Alshon Jeffrey, the target monster. They may have to go to him a lot just to try to stay in this game. So
Right.
Really like those two guys, and that is likely it.
Yeah. So Alshon was limited in practice today. He's got this calf thing that's bothering him. Really just been struggling all year with injuries. Just hasn't been fully healthy, but still really good. And when he's been able to take the field, so he's the fact that he wasn't out of practice, just limited. I think he's more probable than not. So I do think that he's an interesting play. I agree that the running back by committee here. Forte only got 10 touches, and just kind of splitting carries with Langford doesn't make either of them really interesting. And Minnesota's pretty good in general. So yeah, so I don't think there's really any cash game plays on either side besides maybe Adrian Peterson if you want to go that route. But yeah, so I think Alshon's definitely interesting. Yeah, you can look at Miller as well. He was out of practice today, but I think it was just an illness. I don't think it was like an injury or anything. So I think that he's going to be on track to play as well. I do like the Diggs call. If you look at his recent games, I think people are going to be off of him. But if you look at his matchups, he's been up against the Cardinals and the Seahawks the last two games, which is just, those are just tough matchups. It's not like Bridgewater's an elite quarterback that's going to kind of rise above and get him the ball. So I think this game definitely sets up better for Diggs. So I don't think you could trust him in cash, but I do think that in tournaments that he's definitely pretty interesting for sure. So, but overall, not a great matchup on either side. More tournament than cash here. Beside maybe Alshon, just because you're right, he is getting a bunch of targets and pretty good, but I still think he's probably more tournament than cash too. Okay, let's keep on moving. Houston at Colts is next game that we have. There's no line, presumably because we weren't sure exactly what was going to happen with Andrew Luck. He had returned to practice, and they said that he potentially might play, but then they came out this afternoon and said that he will not play. So, so that obviously, just puts definitely changes the game. Kind of probably takes everyone on Indy out of play here. But maybe some Houston guys, I guess. What are your thoughts on this game, Tank?
Yeah, so it's looking like the starting quarterbacks are going to be touchdown Jesus or clipboard Jesus versus T.J. Yates, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So if you're thinking about clipboard Jesus being in the game, then Houston defense is definitely in play. I think that's
for sure.
Right there. And besides that, I actually like the way T.J. Yates has looked when he's been in. And you know who he's throwing the ball to? Nuke the bomb. And I think the last time he played against the Colts, he honey roasted, just torched them. So I really like that, especially since he's just had like a couple okay outings the past couple weeks. This would be the time where a lot of people are off of him, and then he just goes ham. So really like him. Alfred Blue was relegated to special teams last week, and then there was just a backfield by committee. So even though you have a decent matchup against that Indy run defense, there's not a back that you can really hang your hat on. So I think the only really solid plays for me are, Nuke the bomb and the Houston Texans defense.
Yeah, this is a really ugly game for fantasy purposes just because of all the injuries, Yeah, I agree on that. The Texans defense, I think they're a great play, and they're really cheap. They're only $2,500 on DraftKings, which is obviously pretty low. So, I definitely think they're a great play. And then, so Hopkins is really the only other guy that I'm looking at here. He did have 169 yards on 11 receptions against Indy earlier in the year. Struggled the last couple weeks, I guess maybe the last 3 weeks or so. Matched up against what's his name, Logan Ryan last week against the Patriots, who's one of the better backs in the league. So I think that was just a tough matchup. And so I think that, people might be off him a little bit just with struggles. But I do think this is a really good matchup, and obviously a lot better one than the last couple of weeks that he's been in. So I think that this is a really good spot to target him. His salary is at 85 on DraftKings. So he is right at Julio's salary and below Antonio Brown and Beckham. So I definitely think that he's in a really good spot. I think you could go him and Cash. I'm comfortable with that. And I definitely think you should have some exposure to him in tournaments because, I do think he has that upside that we saw earlier in the year where, 200 yards-ish on double-digit receptions. Kind of really doesn't even matter who his quarterback is. I mean, Hoyer is fine. I think Yates will be fine. They just got to give him the ball, and he can do stuff with it after. So, I think that's the play plus the defense. No one on Indy for me. That would potentially change if Luck was back, even though it is still a tough matchup. But the fact that he's out, nah. Cool. Let's keep moving.
Right.
KC at Baltimore is the next matchup. Over-under is 41.5, so just kind of really low. So, a lot of these games have been pretty low lately. And the Chiefs are 7.5-point favorites, so one of the bigger ones that we've seen lately. So, so start with you, Tank. What are your thoughts on this one?
Kansas City defense. I mean, I think they have Jimmy Clausen still at quarterback for Baltimore. Like KC's defense.
So I will say, sorry to interrupt you, I meant to introduce news. So Spencer Ware did not practice today and is pretty questionable for Sunday. So that would obviously break up the running back by committee and give Sharkhandrick West kind of full backfield privileges.
Well, if Sharkhandrick West has full backfield privileges, then definitely he's a play.
Yeah.
I was one of the guys that was burned by Rawls last week.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't by a bad eye because obviously, I mean, you saw the way that he was toting the rock before he got injured last week. I mean, he was just gashing them. And so if he were able to play the full game, he probably would end up with a monster stat line. And so you can see something similar going for Sharkhandrick West if he gets the boatload of carries and stays healthy the way they've been running the ball in Kansas City. So if that's the case, if he's the only back, I like Sharkhandrick West, like that Kansas City defense. This could be another good game for. I think Macklin kind of cooled off a little bit last week. Yeah. But this could be another game where he blows up against that Baltimore Ravens pass defense. I mean, you could potentially say that Alex Smith could be a sneaky GPP play. It's just, is he going to get enough yards, throw enough I mean, he could potentially throw enough touchdowns to it, maybe. But, I mean, is he going to get the yards to kind of get the bonus points and all that stuff too? Right. I don't know. I mean, this is a great matchup for him. So
yeah,
it just depends on how high you think his ceiling could get. I mean, he probably doesn't eclipse the number I would want him to get, but he could. And then there's nothing on Baltimore's side, really. I mean, that Kansas City defense is just really tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, not a whole lot there on Baltimore's side. They've just been ravaged by injuries all around. They really have no players that they started with during the regular season.
It's not wasting time on them, though. How about let's talk about Kelsey for me. Give me your thoughts on Kelsey.
Travis Kelce. Yeah, so he's interesting because I think he's a guy that a lot of people thought that he was going to be like dominant this year. Thought he was going to be like mini Gronk, and obviously hasn't been that. I don't really like him in this matchup, really, though. I mean, Baltimore's obviously really bad against wide receivers and quarterbacks. I mean, they're the second worst team against quarterbacks according to our point plus minus. Only to the Saints are the first, and obviously we've talked a lot about how bad they are to quarterbacks, but they're not as bad in the middle of the field against tight ends. They're actually one of the best teams according to our data against tight ends. So I don't love the matchup, and really, I mean, this is kind of just how I feel about the passing game in general. I'm just not sure if they're going to pass that much. I mean, if they I think this might just be a game where they give West the ball, or really whoever plays, and Baltimore I just don't think has the firepower to keep up with them, and I think they'll just run it down their throats, and I mean they're pretty heavy favorites here, so I would just imagine they'll get up in the second half and just kind of run the game out. So,
and I totally agree with you. And the only reason I would just consider maybe using them as a contrarian play because, I mean, Oakland and San Diego, those are teams that have struggled against tight ends. Then he catches like 5 balls for damn near 60 yards against the two of them. And then you think about Buffalo, a team that's traditionally been at least pretty decent against the tight end. And then that matchup, he had 4 for 69 a tub. And so, that's probably the best game in the last month. So,
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, he's just been a total disappointment. I mean, it's basically throwing darts and just hoping you land on a game where he performs, but maybe this could be one since he's had 2 duds in a row. But
Yeah.
there's no doubt to support it. It's just guessing and just going with your gut.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's on him. I don't think that it's like I don't think he's gotten any worse than he was last year. I think he's still a really good player, really dangerous. I just don't think they're really using him like they should. So, I mean, I guess if you think they would use him in this game, then for sure. I mean, I think that he would have a good game if they really focused on him in the offense. I just obviously they're not going to do that this year. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's some upside just because of how talented he is, but I'm not sure if I would bet on that. Yeah, so those are my thoughts. I think Shark Energy West, if Spencer Ware isn't able to go, is kind of a must play in cash games. Kind of an auto play, so for sure. So monitor that news. If Spencer Ware's not able to play, then yeah, definitely go Shark Energy West in this matchup for sure. And yeah, I agree. Theoretically, Alex Smith is a great play. Yeah, 7.4 opponent plus minus Baltimore has, which is the second worst, only to New Orleans. But yeah, you're right. I don't trust the game script, and I'm not sure that this is going to be a passing game for the Chiefs. Okay, let's keep moving. Tennessee at New England is the next game. Over-under is 47, and New England huge favorites. 14 is the spread. So really, really large. Yeah, so I will start with you. So it looks like I guess I'll introduce some news. Looks like we should potentially maybe have some Julian Edelman. Apparently, he was practicing today, and the reports, some of the beat writers were tweeting about how good he looked on the field in practice today. So that was a good news for him being able to play. Like Garrett Blunt is out, and we're not exactly sure how the backfield is going to break down. But yeah, so that's kind of the news. I'll kick to you and hear your thoughts first.
If Edelman plays, I mean, unless they just give us some news saying that he's full go, going to play like his full snaps, I don't know if I would touch him. I mean, honestly, I would expect for them to hold him out until the playoffs, but at the same time, I thought that with Gronk too when he came back last week. So go figure on that. But I guess I'll cover Tennessee's offense because that'll be easier to go through pretty quickly. Like, Bill is really good against, rookie quarterbacks. So it's going to be tough sledding for that offense. So I really don't like anyone on the offense. But if you want to think about someone who will potentially get a lot of volume, it'll be the tight end, Delaney Walker, just because Mariota's probably going to be confused by some of the looks he gets from Bill and just have to check down. Otherwise, I mean, I don't think there are really any good plays on that Tennessee side of the ball. And, Gronk's back, so Gronk's in play. Brady, I mean, he's going to have a really good matchup here against Tennessee. Probably not a back that – I mean, we don't know what they're going to do at the back, so you really can't touch any of those running backs. And
so they signed Monte Ball.
Yeah, Monte Ball.
What do you do with him? Yeah.
I think if anyone gets the lion's share of the carries is going to be Bolden, and then if they decide to just throw the ball –
James White.
At the time, there's going to be White, but
right.
I mean, Tennessee has been better again. Well, I think, I mean, I really think just because that offense is in flux, there's really not too many people you can actually just hang your hat on besides Brady and Gronk.
Yeah, I agree. And this is obviously a really tough matchup for Tennessee. But if we're talking New England side, obviously that's where a lot of the points are, especially in the Vegas line. Yeah, Brady is in a good matchup here, and Gronk especially is in a really good matchup. Tennessee has been pretty bad at tight ends. I think it's one of the better matchups of the slate. Yeah, it is, according to opponent plus minus, it's the second best matchup of the slate. Only is just a little bit worse than, I guess not a little bit worse. Oakland's been really bad, so a lot worse, but still second worst to tight ends is Tennessee. They've allowed 5.8 points over expectations to tight ends. The problem is you would expect them to get up pretty early. I guess you could bank on the fact that if they got up pretty early, it would be because of potentially Gronk. So I think there's a lot of upside there. I mean, he's Gronk, and it's an easy matchup for him. So that's obviously a guy that you want exposure to. But I think really the value is going to be in this running game, and I think right now we have to lean Bolden would be the guy that we want to take, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if they're going to just, pound the ball on someone, it's going to be Bolden. It just depends on how they're going to come out this with their game plan. I mean, I think Tennessee has been a little bit better against the pass than the run, but at the same time, it's not like they're outstanding against the pass. We saw what, Bortles and Allen Robinson and with Fitzpatrick and Brandon Marshall and Decker and those guys were able to do against the Tennessee pass defense the past couple of weeks. So I wouldn't be surprised if Brady went out and ran the ball 30 times or threw the ball, 40, 50 times against them. So, and that's what confuses you. I mean, when there's like just an obvious matchup, then you kind of get a beat on what Bill's going to do. But with this one, I mean, I think odds are that, Bolden gets a decent amount of carries. Like probably the backs end up splitting about 50-50 with the game plan being a little bit more pass heavy than run, which is a bold bit, it bodes well for Gronk and then Amendola. If Edelman plays, then, for him. And, but yeah, like we said, just trying to guess what's going to happen. The only guys you can really hang your hat on, at least cash-wise, is Brady and Gronk, and then GPPs. Then you just got to sprinkle just based off how you think the game flow is going to go, whether it's Bolden, White, Amendola, Edelman, maybe LaFleur. Pick your poison.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I do think that Bolden would be a really good play in a different slate. But yeah, since we have some of these other really good values, we've talked about Sharkandrick West just even last game, who, if he gets all the carries because Spencer Ware is out, then I think that he's obviously a must-play cash game guy. And then, you're also talking Fozzie Whitaker, who's at minimum salary for Carolina, potentially getting all the carries as well. So I think that Bolden's a really good play, but maybe not cash because of the I think he's good in cash, but maybe not the best maybe he's not a top 2 cash guy where you normally would think he would be at. Well, he's only $3,200. So normally in a slate, he would be one of the better options. But the fact that you have Sharkandrick West potentially and Fozzie Whitaker and some other really good guys, maybe you just don't take the risk on how the game's going to go and go with those 2 guys instead. But yeah, I do think that Brady and Gronk are obviously really good plays. And, the running backs just kind of how you think that they're going to be. So maybe just kind of tournaments, just kind of sprinkle them around and hope one of those guys goes off. Probably one of them will go off. The issue would be trying to predict which one for sure. Cool. Let's keep on moving. The Cleveland Browns at the Seattle Seahawks is the next game we got. 43 is the total, and it's pretty much all on the Seattle side because they are 14.5-point favorites. So it puts implied points for Cleveland at like 14.3, which is like the lowest we've seen this year. So I think you can effectively just not even think about the Browns this week. Like you can think about the Seahawks, but just don't worry about the Browns. Don't put them in your lineup. Don't worry about them.
Yeah. I think basically it's just going and saying which guys in Seattle are GPP and which guys are cash, basically. I think the defense is cash. I think Russell is cash.
Yeah.
Bryce Brown, it seems like he's going to get that Thomas Rawls, Marshawn Lynch type workload. If that's the case, cash. Doug Baldwin has been a beast lately.
So good. Is he good? Or obviously he's good, but I just didn't see the talent coming out of it. It just kind of came out of nowhere for me a little bit lately.
He's not like a phenomenal talent like a Julio Jones or OBJ or someone like that, but he's a good, solid receiver who really fits their system well.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, you're right.
Russell's looking for him, and so, I think those 2 translate to the numbers that he's throwing up right now.
Yeah, and Russell has just been a beast lately.
Yeah. Baldwin, I think the way he's been playing, you definitely have to look at him as cash in this matchup. Yeah. But also probably GPP because I think he's not sexy, so a lot of people aren't going to be on the Doug Baldwin. So he'll probably have a low enough ownership to ball out against Cleveland and do well for you in GPP. I really liked Tyler Lockett last week, and he balled out of control.
Yeah.
He has another really good matchup here against Cleveland. Damn, and honestly, I mean, just looking at Lockett, I mean, what's his value right now? I mean, because I would damn near almost consider him for cash too. I mean,
he's at 42.
Yeah. I mean, just based off what he's been doing the past couple of weeks and the way he's been balling in this matchup, I tell you how much I like him. I dropped Dez in my season-long league, and I added Tyler Lockett.
Wow, that's bold.
So that tells you how much I like him and how much I hate Matt Castle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love Lockett. I think he's still really underpriced. I think he's actually really good. He was like the 8th or 9th wide receiver taken in the NFL draft this year, behind a lot of guys. And I think that he might be one of the best wide receivers in the class. So, I think he's really good. Obviously, Baldwin's been balling out. Yeah, so, the question is there downside to this matchup just because, could Seattle just get up really early and then it doesn't matter? Potentially, but they did that last week, right? And it didn't really matter for these guys. Like, they still put up a ton of points. Like, they were up early even the last several weeks on these guys and still put up a lot of points. So I do think there's some upside. I think Russell and Baldwin and Lockett are all really good plays. And then, I guess the question would be trying to figure out, what exactly this running back situation is going to be for them. I don't know. You're saying Bryce, but he's actually not in the salary pool for DraftKings, so you can't even play him, unfortunately. So yes, if you want to get exposure to them, it's going to have to be on the pass catching side. But there is obviously a lot of upside, and I think that GPP should have exposure to Russell, Baldwin, Lockett, and obviously the Seattle defense is going to be cash play for sure, and obviously a really good play going against the Browns offense that really is the Browns team in general that's just really bad. So, we don't need to harp on that too much more, just because I think it's pretty fairly obvious who to go in that matchup. So we'll keep moving. Green Bay at Oakland's the next game. Over-under is 47, and it's actually a little bit closer than you might expect as far as the spread goes, but Packers are 3-point favorites. Kind of surprised if I told you before the year that Green Bay was going to be 3-point favorites in Week 15 against Oakland, you would have thought I was crazy, but here we are. So, So what are your thoughts on this one, Tank?
These are teams where, I think there's always a game that I try to pick out each and every week that could potentially be a shootout. This could be a shootout.
Yeah.
Just based off how the defenses are played. They're pretty erratic, and sometimes they play really close games. Sometimes they give up a lot of points. Just kind of bouncing. I think both quarterbacks have decent matchups this week because both defenses are able to get to the quarterback, but at the same time they give up plays. The running backs, I think Oakland's run defense is a little bit better than Green Bay's. I think we saw what Darren McFadden was able to do with limited carries against Green Bay. I think Latavius Murray could be in play. I think Richard Rodgers stands out just because we know traditionally Oakland has been pretty bad against tight ends.
Yeah.
And so, he can definitely be in play. And Rodgers has actually been looking more his way the past few games. And then when you look at it from the wide receivers, I think Amari Cooper has been very disappointing the past.
Yeah, he didn't have a catch last week.
Yeah, so usually when that happens and you have an elite wide receiver, I think I said it a few weeks ago when I think he had a lot of targets and no catches, and they went back and made a concerted effort to give him the ball, and I think he had like over 10 catches or something like that. I have to look that up just to make sure I'm not lying, but it was something like that. So I would expect something similar coming from them this week with a pretty favorable matchup against the Green Bay Packers. So look for that. Yeah. I think Crabtree is definitely in play. He's been a target monster for Derek Carr as well. And then on the flip side, those Green Bay wide receivers. I think the only one, it seems like Cobb is starting to become Mr. Dependable for Rodgers again, but other than that, I mean, it's tough sledding trying to pick what those wide receivers are going to do, and all of them have disappointed this year. So, I mean, I think those wide receivers are more GPP than anything else. But, yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Yeah, so you're right about Cooper. I have the stats in front of me. So yeah, so he had that game a couple weeks ago where he played the Lions and only had a catch for 4 yards and really struggled. And then you're right, they came back and targeted him pretty heavily, and he finished with 7 receptions for 115 yards. So yeah, so they really focused on him. So yeah, he obviously had a really tough matchup last week. He was going against Denver, the Broncos, and as a rookie wide receiver going against that elite defense, that's just a tough situation to be in. So obviously this one's a lot easier. So I don't think he's in cash play, but I do think that he's very intriguing, and you could probably get him at a pretty good ownership discount for sure, especially in tournaments. And I kind of agree with the rest of the plays on Oakland. Yeah, you could look at Crabtree for sure. He's was a little down last week too, but I mean, obviously that a lot of that had to do with Denver. Yeah, Latavius is certainly not cash, but and I don't necessarily love him that much in GPPs either that much, but I guess you could look that way. Yeah, but Green Bay, I think the guy that I'm really looking at, I do think that Richard Rodgers is obviously a really good play in tournaments. He had that really good game a couple weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago against Detroit, where he went off for 846 and a touchdown. He also had a touchdown last week, even though it was just short goal line touchdown. I do think he's a really good tournament play because of what we know about Oakland and defending tight ends. But I also think it's important to know it's not like they're just naturally bad against tight ends because they have tight end next to their name. It's because they're really bad in the middle of the field. And obviously Rodgers is going to be in the middle of the field, but also Randall Cobb is. So that's why I think I'm really on Randall Cobb this week, and especially in GPPs, because playing in the slot, obviously that puts him, if Aaron Rodgers gets him the ball a lot in the middle of the field, and he can go up against these really bad Oakland defenders in the middle, that sets up that he could break one for a touchdown. So, so I think that he's actually a really good play for sure. And I agree. Cincinnati at San Francisco is the next game, and we'll keep moving. Over-under is 40.5, so that's the lowest of the slate, just miserably low. And over, so the spread, I'm sorry, Cincinnati is 4.5-point favorites. Yeah, so I guess we'll start. So Andy Dalton, obviously not playing. A.J. McCarron's going to get the start, who actually, was okay in taking over for him last week. Threw 2 touchdowns, also had 2 picks. But, has looked okay. He was actually pretty good in the preseason when they gave him some action when obviously Andy Dalton was out. So I do think McCarron's capable and a pretty good matchup here. Eifert was out of practice today, is questionable. He's got a concussion, so it's whether he can clear protocol. So I honestly don't know either way. So I'm not going to try to guess whether he's going to play or not. I think it's probably 50-50 at this point. So definitely monitor that news. But, so Tank, I'll kick it to you. What are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, like you said, AJ played better probably than we all expected coming into the game. I mean, it was good to see him get that long ball to AJ, especially going against this matchup with the San Francisco 49ers pass defense. That being said,
we got AJ to AJ.
Yeah, but the Niners play really good defense at home.
Yeah.
So, I think of course, just based off the injuries that are on Cincinnati, anything you're doing is going to be straight up GPP plays because I don't think there's anything you can hang your head on. But I think AJ is interesting. I think Cincinnati trying to establish the run because they have a young quarterback with Jeremy Hill against that San Francisco run defense, even though they play better at home. It's interesting. I think the Cincinnati defense needing to make plays to compensate for a backup quarterback, leading them into an away game and still trying to keep their playoff aspirations and bye weeks and all that stuff alive.
Mhm.
they come into play. And I also think like a San Francisco defense that plays well at home, playing against a backup quarterback, they come into play. And then we've also seen teams that have had some success running the ball against Cincinnati, even though those are better offenses, like Thomas Rawls running for a plus 100 yards or something like that in Cincinnati.
Mhm.
You have like a Sean Drawn who gets the lion's share of the carries, but that's not a really good matchup, nothing that you would lean on or anything like that. But,
Right.
I mean, it's just something worth noting. And I believe that's pretty much it. That's all I got for this one.
Yeah, so the plays that I'm looking at, I do think Cincinnati defense is fairly interesting in tournaments. I do think there's a lot better plays in cash, but obviously Blaine Gabbert, who hasn't been that bad this year, I admit. Obviously, he can still, throw the ball away. So there's some upside there for the Cincinnati defense if you want to roll with them in a tournament, just to get a low on team. Yeah, but I do think McCarron's been pretty good. When we've seen him, he was good in the preseason and came in. And I think the interesting thing to watch was, where he really focused on. And I think, he answered that, pretty adamantly. He went pretty heavy at AJ Green as the guy that he was going to focus on the pass game. He had that really nice touchdown to him, but also just kind of really looked his way all the time. If Eifert's out, and obviously Green's going to be the guy that he's focusing on, I think Green's in cash at 7.9. He's been killing it lately. He's gone over 100 and been right around 130 yards the last 2 games. Obviously scored a touchdown in the last 3. So I think he's pretty safe in this matchup, but also has a lot of upside because I think McCarron's just going to look at him a ton, especially if Eifert's out. He's really the only guy that they're going to look at in the passing game. I guess they could dump down a little bit to these running backs, but I think AJ to AJ is going to be the play for sure here. And I agree. I guess you could potentially look at Drawn and some of these other guys. I guess the running situation on either side, but I'm not sure if there's a lot of upside here. And I don't really think that you have to. We talked earlier about all the value in some of these cheaper running backs, especially because of injuries. So I don't think you need to even look really here besides some tournaments here or there. But
I think the only running back that I would really focus on in this is Jeremy Hill, just because we definitely have some cheaper running backs. So I think a lot of guys would probably look to them. If you look at Hill's last outing against Pittsburgh, he only had 4 points. But like I said, with a young quarterback, maybe they lean on him in a decent matchup against that Niner defense. So if you want to look for a guy who may just be a little bit looked over because you have a lot of guys who are cheaper than 5,000, or you may feel are a lot better than him that are above 5,000, he could be someone that just kind of falls right in the middle. And at least last year, Cincinnati was the number 1 team, rushing team in the red zone. So if that's the case, likely it would be Jeremy Hill getting those carries. But like you said, there are some really good plays at cheaper values this week too. So just another guy to be mindful of.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. All right, let's keep on moving. We got a couple more games left. Again, it's a big slate, but we're getting through all of them. Broncos at Steelers is the next game that we have here. Runner's 44.5, so about average. And Steelers are 6.5 point favorites, so a little bit surprising there. So I guess more points than I expected. Vegas to predict Pittsburgh to score, but they are at home and an elite offense, even against really tough defense like Denver. So I guess the question here is, one of the better offenses, in terms of upside and receivers against one of the best defenses. I guess you think that they'll kind of just meet in the middle and have an okay game, or do you think one can really take advantage of the other, or how do you expect this one to go?
I would honestly expect them to meet in the middle and have an okay game. And I'm talking about Pittsburgh offensively, just for the simple fact that, they're playing with Brock Osweiler, and he's been okay for him, but it's not like he'll be able to keep up with the shootout with Pittsburgh. So I would expect that Denver defense to go in the game knowing that they're playing against a high-octane offense. They're going to have to keep the Pittsburgh Steelers points to a manageable amount in order for them to win the game. So I would expect them to come and play really good ball defensively. Therefore, I think Antonio Brown, even though I really like him, I really like Martavis Bryant, I like those guys as players. I'm expecting, Talib, Harris and the defense just to come out and play some hard-nosed ball. So,
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, I mean, I think just based off that, I mean, maybe all of their ceilings get knocked down slightly for those wide receivers, for D'Angelo Williams, for Ben Roethlisberger, just because of what's on the line. And Denver really needs to get this win in order to try to maintain first-round bye since the Patriots won last week and stuff like that. Like, that's why I expect Cincinnati, I expect Denver, I expect New England, all those teams to come out and play some really good ball because they're all fighting for that first-round bye, and that's critical, especially when you have guys that need to get healed up. So I'm not expecting Pittsburgh to run away with this one, so it should be pretty competitive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so this is obviously a tough game to predict, so it takes me off of cash for these guys. But, obviously, there's a lot of elite players, especially on the Pittsburgh side, in terms of their talent. So I think that you could, really focus on those guys, especially in GPPs. You always want to get guys who are talented. You get them under own. I think they will be a little under owned because of the matchup. I do think there is some potential here. I think Antonio might be okay. And I actually like Heath Miller. He didn't practice, but I think he's still going to play this week. He got 10 receptions last week. And so Denver is obviously really good in most areas of their defense. But I guess the one area, if you could exploit anything, it's kind of in the middle of the field to tight ends. They're about average as opposed to the best in the league in other areas. So I think if you're going to exploit one place, it would be the middle of the field, which obviously Heath Miller would be against tight ends, and maybe Antonio Brown gets there a little bit too. So those are plays I think that are pretty good GPP plays. But yeah, other than that, it's just a really tough matchup. On Denver's side, there's not a whole lot of value, in my opinion, with these guys. Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
I think one thing I could point out is that, Pittsburgh, they've had their struggles against tight ends. And minus the drop that Vernon had at the end of the game, I mean, he looked better than he has in a long time in that game last week. So
Right.
Looks like Osweiler was targeting him a lot. They're trying to get him more involved in offense. And so maybe he tries to redeem himself for the drop and all that stuff this week and with a decent matchup. So maybe that's something that you can kind of look at.
You're right. He did have 7 receptions last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. So, some potential pretty good GPP options here because of their ownership, but I don't think I'll have a lot of cash plays here. So, all right, keep on moving. We got 3 games left. Next one up is Miami at San Diego. Line here is 46, and it was a pick, and it looks like, but moved to 1.5 in favor of San Diego at home. So a fairly close game it looks to be. And I'll kind of kick it to you. What are your thoughts on this one?
Well, when you look at Miami going against that San Diego run defense, I mean, I think about Lamar Miller, who was averaging, I think, damn near 8 yards a carry in the first half of that Monday night game, and then he just doesn't get the rock the second half, which made no sense whatsoever. I mean, so especially when you come from Dan the Man Campbell, whose philosophy has been establishing the run and maintaining the run. So that was a little odd. So I would expect them to kind of address that this week and in the game on Sunday. So maybe look to Lamar Miller. Jarvis Landry is likely going to see that cornerback Verrett, who's been playing pretty good ball this year. So, I mean, you may have to mark him down a little bit as far as your expectation of what he can do. Devontae Parker, had two pretty good stat lines going into Monday night and then basically threw up a dud. So maybe he bounces back because it seems like the number 2 receivers going against San Diego have had some success, the guys that aren't lined up on Verrett. Then as far as San Diego, man, I mean, they've just been dealing with like a ton of injuries. And then they had a really ugly game against the Chiefs that I haven't had an opportunity to watch just yet. But, I mean, I really don't know what to expect from them. I mean, of course, that Miami defense has been a little shady as of late.
They've been bad,
Yeah, I mean, so if anything, maybe it looks like Gates and Floyd and Javonte Herndon. I mean, Gates had 8 targets, Floyd had 9, Herndon had 7. So you're looking at that matchup against the Miami pass defense. There you go. Miami run defense has been a little shaky. I remember what Washington did to them early on in the year, but San Diego, they haven't been able to put up a good running effort all season. So I'm not expecting much. So whatever you expect from San Diego is going to be what Phillip Rivers does in the pass game. I mean, I really wouldn't put too much faith in that run game. I mean, Melvin Gordon still doesn't have a fucking rushing touchdown, right?
I don't think so.
Well, maybe this is the week he gets one, but I doubt it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really trust any of the San Diego guys. I think if you want to look at someone, it's Antonio Gates, who has gotten some more volume in the last couple of weeks, and I think there's some upside there. You're right. Miami's been pretty bad last couple of weeks, especially against the pass. Giants shredded them last week. Just had some bizarre plays where they left Odell Beckham open, wide open, which is a questionable strategy. So I think he's interesting. The problem is, they just have a lot of guys to exploit that. So kind of Gates for me, and that's about it. In Miami side, they're impossible to predict what they're going to do. We thought that they would go more run heavy, and now they passed it 41 times last game, and it's just with all their coaching changes, it's impossible to really predict what they're going to do. So they should have gone Lamar Miller more.
You were having success with Lamar.
So I don't think you can go cash just because you're not sure what they're going to do. But obviously Lamar Miller has been a beast lately. He was limited today in practice, so obviously monitor that, but I think he'd be fine. Jarvis Landry, same deal, but I think he's interesting. Devontae Parker really struggled last week, but he kind of showed what his talent was a couple weeks ago against Baltimore, and maybe even a week before that against the Jets. So I think that he's interesting. So I think there's a lot of potentially good GPP plays from Miami, and Gates on the other side. The problem is that it's just not a great probability of those happening, and it's hard to predict which one's going to happen. So GPP exposure, but I don't think cash plays here for me. Cool. Let's keep on moving. 2 more games left. The Sunday night game is Arizona at Philadelphia. Over under is 50.5. So I think that is the second highest of the slate. Yep. Second highest, only to the last game that we're about to talk about, which is Detroit, New Orleans. And the spread is pretty close. It's 3.5 to Arizona. So, so obviously really these last 2 games are super interesting in terms of fantasy goodness, as Peter would like to say. So, I'll kick it to you and then give my thoughts after.
Where's Toast? That's what I'm looking for. Because I know whoever gets the lion's share of the matchup on Toast, they probably should have themselves a decent game. Because actually, Eric Rowe, the rookie cornerback for Philadelphia, has been playing pretty good of late. But damn, Maxwell, man, that dude just gets burnt on the regular, man. It's crazy. And so I think that's going to end up being Floyd or John Brown. Whoever gets his number the majority of the times, I think both of those guys should have some exposure. Carson Palmer, just because that pass defense as a whole has struggled this year. I really like what David Johnson's been doing. I'm not exactly sure what his value is. He's at 5,700. So he's still fairly reasonably priced in a decent matchup. So you definitely look at him. And then Philly. Philly, they've been playing decent ball as of late, but, can you really, depend on them? Can you trust them? And plus they have a really tough matchup against Arizona. So, anything you do Philly-wise is going to be GPP plays. There's no one you can really put your faith in on the offensive side of the ball, I don't think. I think – So, you could have some cash options on the Arizona side with Carson Palmer, with David Johnson, maybe with those wide receivers that are priced pretty low because, they just have an awesome matchup against Toast.
Yep.
Otherwise, you just look for a high-scoring game where you may be able to get some sneaky good GPP points out of some of these guys on both sides. Yeah,
I agree. Philly, I'm not too on here. But I do think they're projected to score enough points where you should probably look in tournaments at some of these guys. Again, it's hard to predict where it's going to go. Even the running back, it's just been tough to predict. Is Murray DeMarco finally going to get back into good graces? Probably not. Is this going to be Sproles? It's just hard to tell. So I think obviously maybe some tournament plays here or there, but nothing I wouldn't go crazy with. But Arizona is definitely interesting. I think Palmer is definitely an elite play in cash or tournaments at 7K. He's hit value in just about every game this year. Been really, really good, really consistent. Obviously gets a dream matchup here. Love Michael Floyd. He's still at 44, which is crazy, even though he's killed it the last several weeks. Did struggle against the Niners 3 weeks ago, but other than that, it's just been dominant. David Johnson is definitely a great play. Andre Ellington's still expected to be out here, so we would assume that David Johnson's going to get 20-plus touches again, which would obviously put him in cash play. I'm not sure if he is in the top 2 or 3, potentially because of just some of the other values on the slate. But I think he's obviously one of the best values, running back and of the slate in general. The question is just, you can only fit in potentially 3 running backs, and is he a top 3 guy or a top 5 guy, and potentially, how your roster construction, how you deal with that. I will say that he's a better play on FanDuel, where he's a little bit cheaper in relation to the salary cap as opposed to DraftKings. So, on FanDuel, I would definitely look at him. In DraftKings, maybe your exposure in tournaments, just because I think he has obviously just as much upside as a lot of these value guys, and might be underaround because he's a little more expensive. But Arizona side for sure, you definitely want to target a lot of these guys. Definitely. Cool. Let's keep on moving. Last game, Detroit at the Saints. Over-under is 51, highs of the slate. New Orleans is 3-point favorites. And, so this is super juicy in terms of fantasy potential. Obviously, New Orleans is just awful against quarterbacks and really just the passing offense in general. And Detroit's not that great either. So it seems like there's a lot of potential fantasy plays here. So I'll kick it to you and end with my thoughts before we end the pod.
I would probably expect a lot of folks to be on this game thinking that it's going to be a repeat of the New Orleans Giants game from earlier this year. I mean, I don't think anyone would be surprised if you saw an outcome like that where both of these teams were throwing the ball around a ton. I think last week Calvin Johnson had a pretty off game because I had my opponent in the season-long lead had Calvin, and I know he was pretty pissed off that he really didn't give a lot of fantasy points. I would expect them to target Calvin a lot in this matchup, and whether it's Bro or Brown on him, I mean, I won't expect Calvin to have 2.6 fantasy points in 2 weeks in a row. I mean, I'm looking more like that 35-ish number that he threw up against Philadelphia. So I'm expecting huge things from Calvin. I mean, I think that Stafford is definitely a cash consideration. I think Golden Tate is definitely in play. I like Eric Ebron against the Saints defense. Flip the side around. I mean, I like Drew. Actually, Slay has been playing pretty well at cornerback for Detroit. He will likely be on Cooks. That doesn't scare me off Cooks too much, but it may limit his upside. Snead came out with a big game last week, so he's definitely back in play. And I like the way they've been using Benjamin Watson in offense lately. So I think he's definitely in play against that Detroit Lions defense as well. So, and also I really like Tim Hightower. I mean, he looked good against the Buccaneers, and they used him how they were using Mark Ingram, and he's going to be really cheap. So I think he's a really good play this week. And then maybe you look at – I mean, you have to take in consideration those Detroit Lions running backs for GPPs just because the Saints are so shitty against the run. I mean, this could be the game where we have an Amir Abdullah breakout game and just runs for like 150 or so yards against that Saints run defense. I mean, that's definitely plausible. So I think a lot of guys are in play, whether it's cash or tournaments. I mean, a lot of fantasy goodness in these games for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll give my thoughts before we finish. I think Stafford is kind of the premier cash quarterback option. He's a 6-1 on DraftKings, and really it doesn't even matter who the quarterback is. It's just been, the fantasy mantra this year has just been, if is it quarterback? Is he going against New Orleans? Does he have two legs? Yes, then put him in your cash lineup. So obviously he qualifies on all those things. So 6-1, definitely cash tournament. Obviously a lot of upside as well. Obviously people are going to pair him a lot with Calvin. I do think there's a lot of upside there. I do really like, pivoting to Golden Tate, who I think has a lot of upside as well in this matchup. So I think maybe the play is, a Stafford Tate stack. Or I really don't mind if you definitely want to have the Stafford Johnson stack, but also want to have a unique lineup. Stack them both. Put Stafford, Calvin Johnson, and Golden Tate all in your lineup. We saw Drew Brees. That matchup we were talking about with Giants. Drew Brees had 7 touchdowns, and Eli had 6 or something like that. It was ridiculous. So obviously, yeah, Stafford could go, just throw it around everywhere, and they could each get a couple touchdowns. So. I don't mind that. Ebron is kind of even sneakier if you want to go that route. And New Orleans side, yeah, I actually really like Brandon Cooks. He's been kind of unlucky in the red zone this year. So I do think there's probably some aggression coming for him. And you're right, not the greatest matchup, but I still do think that he's a pretty good GPP play, especially in this high total in this game. And, yeah, I do like Benjamin Watson a lot as well as kind of a pivot. I'm not – in love with his salary at 4.8 on DraftKings, but I do think there's some upside there if you want to kind of pivot off some of the other guys and come down from the Olsen and Gronk, or even come down a little bit from Julius Thomas if you're in that range. So and Hightower's still pretty cheap at 3.9 if you think he's going to get a lot of carries. I am worried about game script. I'm not sure if this turns into a shootout. Obviously. We wouldn't expect Hightower to get a lot of carries here. And so, maybe it's more of a CJ Spiller game. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily bet on that. CJ Spiller hasn't really got any volume lately. But, so I'll really focus on the passing game for these two teams. And I do think this is a really juicy one. A lot of cash game options and a lot of good GPP plays too. So definitely have some exposure, and some pretty heavy exposure in really all of your lineups to this game for sure. So, so that's the last game. Any final thoughts, Tank? Or?
No, Doug, I think we're pretty damn thorough this week, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So that was good. Yeah, we got through them all. Obviously, these last week matchups, during the season, it's a little abbreviated because we have buys and obviously teams on buys, so we only have 13 games in the slate. But these last weeks we have every team playing 16 games. A lot of players, a lot of teams to go over. So appreciate you guys staying through the pod. If you're still listening to us, there may not be anyone listening to us by now. I don't know.
They're still tuning in, man. We still giving them some good shit.
Yeah, I hope so. All right, so appreciate you listening. So Bryan Tank out. Good luck this week, and I hope you guys take down a mill.
Yeah.
And good luck to Bales this week. He's in draft. He's in the fantasy football world championship on DraftKings out in San Diego. He's competing. There's 200 qualifiers, and gets down to 10 players to compete in LA in January for, I think, grand prize is $5 million to first place. So he's competing this week. So good luck to one of our own. Hopefully he gets into the top 10 and gets out to LA for sure. So
he's pounding protein shakes and crushing it right now. Do work, Bells.
Yeah, man. All right. So good luck to the rest of you, and we'll talk to you guys next week.